Our presenter for this session is Katie Huynh. She's a resource sharing specialist at Minitex. Katie manages the Wilson Library campus location where Minitex processes interlibrary loan requests. In addition, she handles requests for items from the Gale Family Library at the Minnesota Historical Society, including genealogy requests. And Katie, I will leave it to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So people can hear me. You can see my screen. Everything looks good. All right, awesome. Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for attending. Welcome to Tips and Tricks on Searching and Requesting Free Genealogy Materials. So my goal of this session is for everyone to go home with at least one useful or interesting piece of information that they can take home with them. I feel like if you can get at least like one useful thing out of a conference session or a webinar, it was a good one. So that's my goal for everyone. All right. So during this session, I will be going over the types of genealogy materials that are found in libraries. I'll go over some tips and tricks on searching and requesting these materials from libraries. I'll mostly be focusing on libraries in the Minitex network because that is usually what I mostly use, but you can apply these techniques to pretty much any library catalog or database. Then I'll be going over some free online genealogy resources. So hopefully after this presentation, you'll have a better understanding of what can be attained from libraries and some better ways to search and request genealogy materials. All right, so first, here are some examples of genealogy materials that are found in libraries. Newspapers, these are most commonly used to find obituaries, marriage announcements, or news articles about family members. The University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Historical Society, and the Wisconsin Historical Society all have large newspaper collections, and Minitex is able to get materials from all these collections. So for example, a complete collection of Minnesota newspapers is held by the Minnesota Historical Society. And also all these are pretty much on microfilm, so they do lend for interlibrary loan if scanning isn't available and if you and your patron has access to a microfilm reader, so that's always an option. All right, next, county plat maps and atlases are also found in libraries. Maps and atlases are typically used to help determine where your ancestor lived. So the University of Minnesota has a very large map collection. They have plat maps from every county in Minnesota, which is pretty cool. And then I know the Minnesota Historical Society also has a nice map collection. Next, I have Norwegian bygdebooks. I'm never sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I think it's bygdebooks. These are books that are full of Norwegian genealogical information. And the University of Minnesota Libraries has a handful of these scattered throughout their collections, and a lot of them actually do circulate. I included a link to finding them in the U of M collection. This link is in the handout that is linked in Sketch in this session profile, so you can find all the links that are in this presentation in there. Then next, immigration records. These are also found in libraries. For example, there is the Immigration History Resource Center at the University of Minnesota Libraries. I also included a link to this collection too. And Minitex has access to this collection, so we can get scans from these materials, and the microfilm does lend for interlibrary loan. And then I know the Minnesota Historical Society and like the Wisconsin Historical Society have various immigration records as well. Then you can also find local history and family genealogy books in libraries, and then federal and state census and other government publications as well. And a lot of these materials can also be found online. So I'll be going over those resources at the end here. All right, so some tips and tricks for searching. So you want to know like where to start looking for genealogy materials in libraries. So if you or your patron is from Minnesota, MinLink can be a great place to start. It connects you to most libraries in Minnesota, including the Minnesota Historical Society. And if the item is found the patron can just place a request using the request item button, just write in MinLink. I'll just show that real quick in case anyone's not familiar. So I'll just go down. I know this is a Norwegian picture book, so this is what you're looking for. Real simple, like this is the one you want. All you have to do is hit request item. So easy peasy, one-stop shopping. All right. Okay. The other option is to go directly to a library catalog. So this is useful if you or the patron knows that a library may have an item. It can also be easier to locate what you're looking for just because, you know, the search list will be smaller just because it's one library, not hundreds. So I've included here the University of Minnesota, and then the Minnesota and Wisconsin Historical Society libraries. These are all great places to look for genealogy materials because all these collections hold a lot of those types of materials. All right, so some tips for searching. I always like to start simple and keep the search broad. So usually you will put in like part of the title, like this as a keyword search, and then from there, I like to use the filter options that you have in a lot of catalogs. For example, filtering to date ranges or format types. So for example, if I'm looking for a newspaper, I would filter it just to newspapers because sometimes looking for newspapers, you kind of get a lot of other junk that's actually not newspapers. So we'll go in and bin link again, and I'll just show that as an example. So we'll just do start debuting here. So this is the newspaper you're looking for. You know, you see up here, you have, you know, over 2,000 results. So just by narrowing it down just to newspapers, you know, brings it down to 31. So there's less to look at. Another thing I like to use is just go into advanced search. Pretty much all library catalogs will have an advanced search. So sometimes if you're looking for like a book title, I'll put it maybe a part of the title and just like the author's last name. You can keep something as a keyword. Sometimes I'll put it as an author, just to kind of keep it broad, but still kind of narrow it down a little bit for you. So those are always kind of like how I like to start off searches. All right. Then it's always good to try multiple spellings or using the wildcard character when searching to kind of broaden your search. I know family names or locations may have been spelled differently over the years, so it's good to try various versions of spelling. So for example, my maiden name is Otto, spelled O-T-T-O, but just kind of from doing my own research, I found it spelled either O-T-T-E or just O-T-T. So I would try using the wildcard whenever like I search. So I would search it as like O-T-T with the asterisks to just broaden my search and try to get things that you might not turn up. Then finally with newspapers, some newspapers are used a lot, again, for genealogy type of materials. So it's good to keep in mind that newspapers, I think some of them have had title changes over the years, or some used to have like morning, evening, or even weekend editions. So for example, the Star Tribune has had several name changes over the years, and they've also used to have like a morning and evening edition as well. So let's just go into the Minnesota Historical Society catalog, and I will show that. So we'll head into their catalog under libraries, archives, and catalogs. And we'll just search the Star Tribune again, and I'll show. So you'll see here, it's going to be this first one here. It's still kind of loading. Here we go. So you can see it actually started in 1987. So for example, if you have a library patron that wants an obituary from a family member who died in about like 1960, they lived in Minneapolis, you wouldn't want to submit the Star Tribune as the title because you can see it actually, that title actually didn't start till 1987. But if you go into the library record, like under the details information, you'll see the earlier title. And lots of times library catalogs will just click it. We'll have a link to that earlier title and you can just click on it. And then you can see their next title, Minneapolis Star Tribune, was actually started in 1982. So you kind of just keep going until you find the correct title. And then that's the one you'd want to submit as your request. All right. Okay. So some tips and tricks for requesting. Submit as much information as possible. Make sure to include any dates, any alternative spellings for names or nicknames or even maiden names can be helpful. And then for obituary request, the publication date of the obituary isn't known, which is usually the case. Submit as much information as possible. So obviously you want to submit the date of death, if that's known, the full name, and then any alternate names, or spellings or nicknames. Remember, a lot of genealogy material often doesn't circulate, especially if it's from an archive or a historical society. Patrons can still request a loan if that's their first choice, but it's always good to indicate what they would like copied, such as the names, any locations, table of contents, or index, just in case the item is non-circulating. Then also remember that most microfilm is available for interlibrary loan. And I know microfilm can be time consuming to like look through, and some locations, like library locations, don't have the time or staff to search through microfilm. So if your patron has access to a microfilm reader, you can always indicate in the notes that you would take it as a loan if a scan isn't possible, because sometimes it always isn't. All right, then over here, I have a couple sites that are helpful for getting more information for obituary request. So from both these sites, you can find date of death, alternate names and spellings, or any relatives as well. Minnesota People Search, I'll just click in here. So this is a really cool site. So this is from the Minnesota Historical Society. You can see they have all sorts of records they can get a lot of information from, and it's fairly easy to search. You just plop in some family names, any dates you might know, and then you can narrow it down to county as well. So it's free to use. So that's a really great one to use. Then also find a grave. So this is the world's largest gravesite collection. And again, it's also pretty easy to use. You can just put in names, any kind of year they were born or died, location. So pretty easy to search. This is also a really cool site if you haven't used it. I highly recommend it. You can find a lot of relatives just through searching through this site. I've definitely have found myself going down a rabbit hole just going through, because it links to like so many other different relatives that you didn't even know of. It's really cool. All right. So here are then some additional free resources. There is a lot of them, so I won't go over all of them in detail, but they are again listed on the handout. So under books, these are some sites that contain whole books that can be viewed or downloaded. A few of them I'm sure most people have heard of. So Internet Archive, How Do You Trust, Google Books. They're all great places to find whole books. I'm going to point out Genealogy Gophers. This one's kind of cool because it's just genealogy books. And again, it has a really easy search interface. So for example, I'll just do my family. I'll just kind of show you what it looks like. So I'll just search the asterisks, and then I know they were from Winston, Minnesota. It's kind of nice. It autofills for location as well. So then it usually pops up a little like excerpt of where in the text your keywords were. So this first one here is actually, these are my relatives here. And to view the whole book, you just click on the title of the book. up here, and you can either view it, do more text searches through here. You can also download the PDF. So again, this is a free site, and it's pretty cool to use. Then over here, maps. So here are some sites that contain digitized maps. The first one, Old Maps Online. This indexes over 400,000 historical maps from around the world that have been digitized from various libraries and archives. And the next one, the Minnesota Historical Aerial Photos. This is from the University of Minnesota Map Library Collection. I'm going to show this site too, because this one's pretty cool if you haven't checked it out before. So basically all these colors, if you zoom in, you see all these colors are actually dots. And then all these dots are different aerial photos. And the colors are, you can see over here, they're like color coded by decade. So, and you can also filter it down to a certain decade if you like. But basically, if you just click on a dot, you can go ahead and click to view. And then it'll bring up the aerial photo, which is really cool. Then you can also search by location too. So I was going to put in Winston again. And then you can see here are all the aerial photos from like the Winston area. All right. Then the last one for maps, digital Plat maps and atlases. This is also from the University of Minnesota map collection. They've digitized some of their older maps. So I'm going to just show this one real quick as well. So this one is organized really nicely. It just goes alphabetical by county, and they let you know what year they have. All right, so then newspapers. Here are a few links that have free newspapers online. Elephine contains historical newspapers from around the world. And then Chronicling America is a searchable database of US newspapers from 1690 all the way up to 1963. So it's a large year span that they cover. Then the Minnesota Digital Newspapers Project. This is actually part of Chronicling America. This database was created by the Minnesota Historical Society, and it just contains Minnesota newspapers. And I'm just going to show this one real quick as well. So this one's organized really nicely. It just goes alphabetical by town or city. And then you can see what newspapers they have for each city or town, and then the date range that they have. And then all these newspapers, you can do keyword searches or text searches for all these, which is really cool. And it's a really neat feature. Then government publications. So the US Census is freely available to search from the government archives. And then the 1950 census was actually just released this year. So that was pretty exciting for a lot of genealogists to have a new census out. Then I have listed here a few digital library collections that are free to use, including our own Minnesota Digital Library. So these digital libraries hold a lot of primary sources that can be useful for genealogy resource. So they're all great places to check out. Then I have listed here just a few archive collections, including the University of Minnesota archives. So these collections have some stuff digitized that can be viewed. And I'll mention again that Minitex does have access to the U of M archives. So anything that's not digitized in their collection, we can get scans from that item and then send that out. Great. Well, then that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Katie, there's a question in the chat asking about kind of free versus for cost sources. It was specifically about, the question was specifically about the Find a Grave site, but could you speak to that specific source and then just kind of generally if any of the services that you've talked about come with a cost?
Everything that I've included in this presentation is all free. So Find a Grave is a free site to use. I know pretty much like the big cost one is the Ancestry, which has a lot of information, but everything in this presentation is free to use. So, and then anything, any stuff from libraries that's within our Minitex network, we can usually obtain.
Could you say a little bit about the extent of support that Minitex can offer to genealogy research? Are you?
Yeah, sure. I know right now we are not going to the Minnesota Historical Society. Pre-COVID, we were going down there, or it was mostly me going down there, filling requests. And then what I usually do, I can do like a little bit of research and digging. So right now, unfortunately, we aren't filling those, but we can fill. For the most part, we see a lot of newspaper requests because the U of M does have a pretty good newspaper collection. So we can do some digging and usually find obituary request, that kind of stuff. But we don't do family trees. We're not those kind of genealogists. We basically just kind of do, we can, like, if you're looking for a piece of information for your family, from your family, we can provide that, like, document, or look through for a book to see if you can find your family member, like in a Plat map, county atlas, or things like that. So.
My unmute button here. There are a few questions that are coming into chat that I'll just read out loud for. Okay, let's see. So first, I was really intrigued by the aerial photographs. How would these be used in genealogy research, genealogical research?
Usually people just kind of use these to find like like their family farm or something that was so you can have like an image of what your family farm used to look like from like the 30s or something, or just like plots of land that your family used to own. So that's usually what that's kind of used for, or just to kind of like locate where your relatives lived.
Yeah, what a cool, like, I wasn't familiar with that tool, but what a neat way to see how an area has changed over time.
Yep, yeah, I know, yeah, because I've used it to find my family plot or whatever, and it's kind of cool to just see it from like, oh yeah, I kind of recognize that tree area. Yeah, so it's cool.
That's when that road went in, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, next question from Di. I'm stuck with my genealogy. I've been using Ancestry, but I can't find enough information on my family in Maryland. Katie, do you have any suggestions?
Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with finding family like in other states, since I usually just focus on stuff that's local. Is usually kind of like what I've worked on. But from like conferences I've gone to, sometimes just kind of reaching out to like historical societies in those areas, see what they have, or just kind of going through even like government, like city halls, seeing what kind of documents they have. Lots of times people wind up traveling to find more information from like areas that aren't local. So that's kind of, yeah, I'm not a whole, like totally familiar with outside of Minnesota resources.
David mentions in chat 23andMe, which is, I think, a tool that we're all hearing more and more about in the genealogy world. Is that driving more?
Yeah, like people have used like I know people have used DNA to find, like, like they call them cousins, like these distant relatives, even from people like family that still live like over in Europe and stuff. And then through contacting them, these like distant relatives, I know people have found more like missing pieces of their like family tree and stuff just from using these DNA services, which is kind of cool. So.
Hey, Katie, I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Can you go over again, like what, if someone has an idea of what they want, how much information do they have to provide before they say, put in an interlibrary loan request in Lake?
I would say at least like a title of something, like the document that they think this is in. So like that for sure. And then like a date range is also really good. And then again, if it's like you're looking for like a family member, any names, like alternative spellings, any like maiden names, relatives, that kind of stuff is really useful. But again, the big thing is having what you want us to look in. So like the newspaper title, or if it's a genealogy book, a map, like a Plat map, atlases, just to have that name so we know where to go to. Yeah.
I was going to say asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Other questions, people, for Katie about genealogical resources? We've got about 8 minutes left for Q&A before our break. I just want to say, if people are starting to kind of head off and take their break a little bit early, thank you very, very much to Katie, and thank you very, very much to everybody who attended this session today. But we'll stick around for another 8 minutes or so if people have questions.
And I hope everybody with at least one useful piece of information. So
I'm going to go look at that aerial
photos. Yep.
photography site. That was
yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. Do you have suggestions for finding obituary keyword searching for obituaries, especially with like kind of familiar common names, common last names? Is there any
If you come
strategy
across like
use?
common last names,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's always good to know like where they lived and where they died is always useful. Again, that find a grave site can be really useful to kind of get more information. So you can have like an idea of like what newspaper it might have been published in, to know like where they died or where they lived. Sometimes those that find a grave, they'll even have like a little synopsis of the person too, depending, I don't even know, I'm not sure where they get all their information, but we'll give like little synopses that might have lead you to where it could have been published. So I highly recommend that site. And then again, like any like censuses too, will give you an idea of where they lived. So you can figure out maybe what newspaper publication it could have been in. So yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was struck by some of those sites that if I had just run across them on my own, they looked very old.
Yeah, the Find a Grave site looks like it was built in the 90s and hasn't been updated, but it's actually a really cool site. So yeah.
Right. So if I just ran across that, I would think that was not a reliable source.
Yep. Yeah. And I found a lot of my family stuff and I've cross-referenced it with other family members. Like, oh yeah, that's correct. So yeah.
All right. I think it's been a while since we've had any questions coming in. Oh, Di says, I bet I can see the land that my house sits on from the aerial map, right? Yeah. If you come from a farm family, you remember probably all those printed farm photographs of the farm from the aerial photography, and that made me think of that. I think we'll go ahead.
A few of us.
Pardon?
I bet there may be a few of us going to the Minnesota Historical aerial photographs.
Be like, why is the site so busy today?
Yeah.
I think we can go ahead and end the session. Again, thank you, Katie. Thanks to everybody who attended.